We should now be live from downtown Mill Bay. Looks like I have a connection. I believe I have sound. So this is for Science and Ethics. I am sorry that I'm not there. I was hoping to be back by today. But it appears that I am not going to be allowed to be back by today. And also, we left off with what ethics isn't. We haven't defined what it is yet, and we're not done that section. However, that's a more difficult section to do remotely, so I'm actually jumping ahead to a section on arguments. So leave some pages or leave spots for you to put some pages into your 3-ring binder. We'll come back to that section later. But for now, we're going to start a new section on arguments. Excuse me. You can probably tell I am not allowed back in the classroom yet. So, arguments are not just yelling at someone as to what they should or shouldn't be doing. An argument in philosophy is a lot more exact thing. So this is notes. Take out your notebook and take notes on this. This is our example argument that I'm going to use. This is an argument I was actually told by someone when my spouse was pregnant, which was, if you're really hungry when you're pregnant, that's an indication that you're going to have a boy. As far as I know, just so you're aware, there's no truth to this, but that doesn't make it any less an argument. An argument has to have 2 parts. And it has to have a conclusion, and that's the thing that you're claiming, and that's the thing that's supported. And it has to have a premise, the reasons why you would support that conclusion. For it to be an argument, it doesn't matter if the premise is wrong or the conclusion is wrong. It's just, does it have those 2 things? Does it have something you're trying to say, which is the conclusion, and does it have something to support that conclusion, a reason to believe it? So our argument is eating lots of calories while pregnant makes boy babies. And so this here, highlighter, this, eating lots of calories while pregnant makes boy babies. So that's our conclusion. Okay? And our premise, if you graph the number of calories a woman eats while pregnant against the gender of the child, the more calories, the more chance of having a boy or baby. So they're saying somebody did a study and found out to be true, and that's our premise. Now, just so you're aware, as far as I know, no one's actually done that. I was just told it, I looked it up, and it turns out it never happened. No one's actually ever studied that. It's probably just one of those urban legends that arise. But it is an argument. It's got a premise, it's got a supported part, and it's got a conclusion. So how we diagram this in philosophy is we may number things. So if our premise here, our conclusion here, let's say that's number 1 in our sentence, and then here the second segment, number 2, that's our premise. Then 2, our premise, leads to, we show that with an arrow, number 1, our conclusion. This is our premise. And this is our conclusion. And if you have both of those things, you can say that you've had an argument. Most of what we call critical thinking, this course, as it's called, critical thinking, is taken from a university level course. If you take any university level course in critical thinking, you're going to find yourself in a course in which you're evaluating arguments. They are essentially logic courses. For our purposes, when someone says an opinion, a view, a thought, a belief, a conviction, an idea, those are all the same thing. You have an argument if you have a premise and a conclusion. Actually, it doesn't matter if it's an opinion. If you have those 2 things, then you have an argument. Then we just examine it to see if you're correct. An issue or a question is the same as having a claim. So a claim is usually another fancy word for the conclusion. And a conclusion without a premise is just an opinion. There's nothing else beyond it. You don't have anything supporting it, so you have no reason for anybody else to accept it. So we're going to get into some critical thinking and into evaluating arguments. So this is a note-taking section, so then I have some practice material at the end, so do take your notes for this section, because we're going to go back to ethics after this, and then come back to here, and so you'll need these. So for the next one, recognizing arguments. So, again, I'm going to belabor the point. 2 parts. We need 2 claims, and the word therefore must be implied before one of the complaints. Now, it could be just implied. So let's go to our first example. So at least one claim must support the other claim being true. The claim that we're saying is true is the conclusion. And the claim that's supporting it, that's the premise. So, for example, cafeteria tastes great. Therefore, we should get early lunch. Pause the video, identify the conclusion and the premise. Once it's unpaused, the word, I'm mispronouncing my words, therefore is a conclusion indicator. Therefore, we should get early lunch. This is our conclusion. This, cafeteria food tastes great, that is our premise. It's like, Mr. Neufeld, today is poke bowls. We should get early lunch. Now, there's a couple missing or implied premises in that, and it's sort of whenever poke bowls are served, the food is so good we have to get there early. We won't go into implied premises just yet; they're fine. But we need a premise. So, cafeteria food tastes great, therefore we should get early lunch. So, what is this premise? Formally define it. The premise is the claim that supports the conclusion, and the claim that's proposed as true is the conclusion. So conclusion is the thing you want the other people to accept as being true. The premise is the reason why other people should accept it as being true. Okay. Now, sometimes the word therefore is missing. Also a reminder while you're taking notes, you can obviously pause this at any time and then take the notes you need. You also don't need to take verbatim notes, summarize where you can. So we don't need the word therefore. Cafeteria food tastes great. We should get early lunch, Mr. Neufeld. The word therefore is not there because English is complex. We don't require the word therefore before a conclusion. So you have to look, where is the word therefore implied? Where should it be? That will probably tell you where the conclusion should be. Next page. An argument can have how many conclusions? Well, let's say I have a premise, like ice cream contains lots of sugar. That's my premise. Well, what can I conclude from that? Can I conclude more than one thing? Sure. I conclude it tastes good. Because lots of sugar tastes good. I can also conclude it might be bad for my teeth or bad for my health. Bad health. So you can have a premise. And again, how we diagram this is a premise. And we've got a couple of conclusions. A single premise can lead to multiple conclusions. There's no reason why you can't have more than one conclusion. Oh, that's supposed to be a 3. separate conclusions that are both true. So there's no limit to the number of conclusions you can have with a particular premise. And the same is true for conclusions. They may be pointed to by more than one premise. I'm trying to think of an example. Let's go with the ice cream model, and let's pick up this one. Tastes good. That's my conclusion. I'm trying to convince you that ice cream tastes good. Well, first of all, I can tell you that it has lots of sugar. Sugar lots. That's a premise to tell you, hey, it's got lots of sugar. But maybe you're like, yeah, it may have lots of sugar, but what else is going to tell me that it tastes good? Well, it's also got lots of fat. That also tastes good. Both of these, independently, can support the conclusion that it tastes good. This is a premise. That's a premise. Oops, 2. And this is our conclusion. So our premises can both point to a single conclusion. In fact, if you have a good argument, you will have many premises pointing to a single conclusion. Mr. Neufeld, we would like early lunch. This is a conclusion that you are stating that you want to be true. Well, what do I have to support this? Well, Mr. Neufeld, cafeteria food is awesome, and today they're serving poke bowls, the greatest cafeteria food they've ever had. I'm like, yeah, but that's not enough. Well, Mr. Neufeld, last day you kept us behind in class, and you owe us an extra 5 minutes. We should get early lunch. That is a completely separate premise. I'm like, well, I don't know. Well, Mr. Neufeld, I talked to Mr. Patel, and he said you should give us early lunch. Now I've got 3 premises, all supporting the conclusion that we should have early lunch. Ideally, a really good argument will be supported by multiple premises pointing at a single conclusion. So, a premise can have multiple conclusions, and this is written wrong. I just noticed this now. A conclusion could have many premises. That's what this should have been asking. Premises. There we go. So we can get more than one premise to a conclusion, and more than one conclusions from a premise. So, we've got arguments. They're made from a premise and a conclusion. That premise can actually lead to more than one conclusion, and that conclusion can have more than one premise. Now, I've got 2 sentences here I would like you to consider. In the first one, she just finished working out because she is sweating. In the second one, she is sweating because she just finished working out. One of these is an argument, and one of these is not. And since I'm not there, we won't do this part yet. We'll just consider this. She just finished working out. So pause this. Try and figure out one of these is an argument. Which one is it? Okay, assuming that you've unpaused. One of the problems with this is this one in particular. Oops. What did I do here with my mouse? That. There we go. She is sweating because she just finished working out. This is just true. Nobody's doubting that a person is sweating, and we're not trying to convince anybody that she just what's going on here. And what's going on here is, first of all, because usually is a premise indicator. Sometimes. We got another because here. And that could also be a premise indicator. So that would mean, because when you give a, Mr. Neufeld, we should go to early lunch because Mr. Patel told us to. The go to early lunch is the conclusion. The thing after the because was the reason. So this is a potential premise. And this, apologies for the quality of my writing, my tablet actually doesn't show the screen, so I'm doing it mostly from guesswork. That could be a premise. But which one of these is actually an argument? Now, X because Y, she just finished working out because she is sweaty. This could be like, was she working out? You look over and they're like, oh yeah, she was. Well, how do you know? Because she's sweaty. So this could be an argument. And if it is an argument, it's going to be this is the premise, and over here is the conclusion. But this one, this can be the conclusion because we're observing this. Nope, that's not in doubt. So this looks like an explanation. So, oh, come on. There we go. Apologies for my pen working. So this is an explanation. So sometimes in English we have things, and that is a terrible way to draw. I tried to make an arrow. That's an explanation. The first one could be an argument, but the second one is definitely an explanation. And sometimes we phrase things as arguments when we just need them as explanations. Hey, you have to number one your room. Why? You have to number one your room because it is dirty. And then, well, I don't think it doesn't matter. That wasn't an argument. That was an explanation. You still have to number one your room. We're not asking you to accept the truth of the proposition. We're just explaining things. If, however, we are convincing someone of something, then we have to include an actual argument within it. So, if you don't need to be convinced of the conclusion, if it's obviously already true, you're just asking the question why, then it's an explanation. Now, this is just restated on the next page because of my messy writing. X because Y might be an argument. She just finished working out because she is sweating, so that might be an argument. But it also might be a cause and effect explanation. She is sweating because she just finished working out. And they look very similar. So one of the difficulties or practices is just to practice distinguishing between explanation and argument. So confusions about arguments. Let's go with Mr. Patrick Lawler. If you are not familiar with Patrick Lawler, he is mentioned in almost any first-year psychology text because he was a railway worker who got a railway spike through his brain and became the subject of a number of psychological papers because it was one of the indications of what the function of your frontal lobes were because he survived. But without his frontal lobes, his personality changed quite a bit. Poor guy. Now, he got a railway spike in, and so which one of these, let's practice again, which one of these is an explanation and which one's the argument? Both of these say X because Y. Only one is an argument. One of them is the explanation. Which one? Pause it, write down which one you think is which, and then unpause it. Okay? Assuming that you paused it first. Patrick Lawler had a world-class toothache. He's got a 4-inch nail in his brain. A is not an argument. This up here, this is the explanation. Why did he have a toothache? Well, we're not doubting that he had a toothache, but we're being given the reason. He had a 4-inch nail in his brain. And neither of those things are things that need to be proved. They're just true. Now, B, much more likely to be an argument. You're making an argument as to why he should have carried insurance, or perhaps arguing why someone else should have carried insurance. Patrick Lawler should have carried insurance because now he can't pay his bills. apparently he's in a country in which they do not have universal health care, like Canada, and he has to carry insurance, which is actually true for Patrick Lawler. And unfortunately, he didn't have insurance, and it was also the 1800s, so the medical care wasn't very great. Wrote papers on him, but they didn't really do much to help him. Okay, with that little bit, we're not going to do that. We're not going to do that either, because that would be difficult to do. Hold it. There it is. With that little explanation, I want you to do activity 1-5, which is on Kia, like last day. I'm going to link it in on the Google Classroom, so there should be a link to there. That's just determining if what you're reading is an argument. It's an argument if it has both a premise and a conclusion. And a word of warning, it doesn't matter if you think the argument is true or not. Arguments can be false, provided they have a premise that actually supports the conclusion. You just might disagree with the premise. Activity 1-6 is identifying conclusions. Do both of those for the rest of the class and for homework, and hopefully I will be back to pick it up next day.